The seal breaks without drama. No shockwave, no light tearing the sky open, no ancient roar echoing across mountains. It breaks the way, exhausted hands finally let go. Chin Hao feels it while standing in an ordinary place, a quiet intersection at dawn, the city bruised but breathing. The dog eye flickers one last time and goes dark, not shattered, not destroyed, released. For a moment, Chin Hao is blind, not physically but structurally. The world loses its edges, pressure, fate, circulation. Everything he once sensed collapses into raw presence. Then something unfolds, not outward, inward. Memory, not his, threads into him. Not images, but intent. His grandfather's will, preserved not as instructions, but as alignment. The seal was never meant to imprison something dangerous. It was meant to delay something premature. What emerges is not a being, it is a function. Long before observers, before correction protocols, before humanity was managed instead of trusted, the reservoir had a second state, one it abandoned because it was inefficient, a state where humans participated consciously in stabilization, not as cultivators, not as rulers of reality, but as co-regulators. His grandfather understood this. He saw that once awareness reached a certain density, control systems would panic and overcorrect. He sealed the function, not to hide power, but to protect humanity from being weaponized against itself before it was ready. The seal breaking does not unleash force, it restores access. Chin Hao feels it settle, not into him, but through him. A permission layer dissolves. Circulation begins responding differently, not prioritizing concealment or suppression, but coherence. Across the world, anomalies shift. Pressure no longer seeks amplification through fear. It disperses toward awareness clusters, resistance networks, grounded individuals, places where attention is steady rather than frantic. The observers feel it instantly. Their systems misfire. Prediction models return null results. Because the reservoir is no longer optimizing for control, it is optimizing for shared stability. Yanluo understands before most. The seal didn't protect us from it, she whispers. It protected us until it. Chin Hao does not feel powerful, he feels unnecessary. And that is the point. The role his grandfather prepared him for was never leadership. It was handoff. As the sun rises, Chin Hao realizes the most terrifying consequence of the seal breaking. The reservoir no longer needs a single anchor. Humanity has crossed the threshold, where awareness itself can carry load. The observers are obsolete, not defeated, outgrown, and whatever comes next will not be decided by hidden factions or sealed rooms, but by how humanity chooses to live with a truth it can no longer forget. The observers understand something before anyone else does. They are not losing power, they are losing necessity. Their systems still function, their arrays still activate, their archives still hold centuries of data. But none of it matters if the reservoir no longer routes reality through them. So they reach for the only leverage they have left. Time, not travel, precedent. Deep within their oldest infrastructure lies a contingency older than most factions. A protocol designed not to suppress awareness, but to overwrite memory continuity. A reality edit so broad it does not erase events. It reframes them retroactively. If successful, humanity will still awaken. But to the wrong conclusion. The observers activate the gambit in fragments, seeding it through surviving correction nodes. History does not change. Records do not vanish. Instead, emotional associations shift. Key moments of resistance lose meaning. Doubt replaces clarity. People remember awakening, but they remember it as chaos. They remember the resistance as destabilizers. They remember control as protection. Chin Hao feels the shift like a cold draft through an open room. The Owen reservoir resists, but hesitates. This gambit does not attack circulation. It attacks interpretation. Yanluo's message arrives without encryption. They're trying to make themselves inevitable again, she says, not by force, by narrative gravity. If the observers succeed, humanity will choose control voluntarily, out of fear of repeating the instability. A managed world, requested instead of imposed, the most elegant prison of all. Chin Hao realizes the flaw instantly. The observers are still thinking in terms of guidance. The reservoir no longer is. He does not counter the gambit. He refuses to compete with it. Instead, he does something no observer protocol ever accounted for. He lets uncertainty remain unresolved. Through the restored function his grandfather protected, Chin Hao opens access, not to answers, but to context. People do not receive explanations. They receive awareness of manipulation itself, the sense that meaning has been edited before and could be edited again, not proof, recognition. It spreads unevenly, imperfectly, humanly. Some reject it outright, some cling to authority harder, but enough people pause. Enough feel the dissonance between their memories and their instincts, and narrative gravity collapses. The observer's gambit fails not because it is exposed, but because it cannot anchor. In a world where awareness is shared, no single story can dominate long enough to overwrite choice. Observer systems begin shutting down autonomously. Not destroyed, abandoned. Prediction engines idle. Correction arrays time out. Archives stop updating because no one consults them anymore. Yanluo watches the shutdown cascade and laughs once quietly. All this time, she says, we thought we were holding the world together. Chin Hao shakes his head. You were holding it still. As the observer's final structures fade into irrelevance, something remarkable happens. Nothing collapses, no apocalypse, no judgment, just a world learning, slowly, painfully, to regulate itself. Chin Hao feels no triumph, only relief. His role is finished. Not because he won, but because the problem no longer requires a solution shaped like him. The observer's final gambit fails for the simplest reason of all. You cannot permanently govern a species that has learned to notice when its thoughts are being guided. And once that noticing spreads, control ends not with a revolution, but with a collective decision to live without it. The first months after control end are quiet in the wrong way. No global celebrations, no clear turning point historians can point to, just absence. Emergency broadcasts stop arriving on schedule. Statistical corrections vanish. Events no longer smooth themselves out into acceptable averages. Some regions flourish unexpectedly. Others struggle without invisible stabilizers they never knew existed. People notice luck behaving differently. Not better, not worse, just honest. A drought lasts longer because no one quietly redirects it. A city rebuilds faster because coincidence no longer drains momentum elsewhere. Inequality becomes more visible, not because it increased, but because it is no longer masked by invisible balancing. This frightens many. Freedom does not feel like freedom at first. It feels like responsibility. New structures form, not centralized, not universal. Local coherence groups emerge, often from former resistance networks. They do not govern, they observe together. When anomalies appear, they gather information openly. When fear rises, they ground it socially instead of suppressing it. There is no shared doctrine. Some regions lean toward spiritual interpretation. Others frame everything in psychological or ecological terms. Arguments flourish, so do mistakes. False prophets still appear, but they burn out faster now, starved of artificial amplification. Without hidden systems feeding belief, charisma alone is not enough. Humanity becomes unevenly awake. Some people never want to know more. Others dedicate their lives to understanding circulation without control. Chin Hao disappears quietly, not into exile, into normalcy. He takes work where he is useful but not noticed. He forms relationships that are imperfect and real. He feels fear without interpreting it as pressure. He grieves without wondering whether grief serves a function. For the first time, his life is not instrumental. And somewhere, no longer above, no longer beneath, the reservoir settles into its simplest state. Not ruler, not God, not guardian, environment. Reality becomes something humanity participates in, rather than something managed on its behalf. Mistakes happen, disasters happen, so do unpredicted kindnesses. And in that messiness, something fragile but unprecedented emerges. A world that belongs to the people living in it. Not optimized, not safe, not controlled, but true. I live in a place where my name means nothing. I wake up earlier than necessary, not from vigilance, not from sensing the pull of fate, but because my body is used to it. I brew tea, open the window, and let the wind pass through a small, ordinary room. There is no dog-eye anymore, no tension of destiny drawn tight like a bowstring. The world is quiet in a different way now. Not empty, just unattended. Sometimes I still notice small misalignments, a day that goes too smoothly, a streak of bad luck that lingers longer than it should. But I no longer feel the urge to correct them. Things are allowed to unfold fully now, including mistakes. Humanity is relearning how to bear responsibility for reality itself. Not everyone does it well. Not all outcomes are kind, but they are real. I still dream of my grandfather from time to time, not as a keeper of secrets, not as a powerful figure, just an old man sitting quietly, looking at me with eyes that already knew how this would end. He never asks whether I regret it, because he understood. This ending was not a loss, it was a return of disorder to the world, a return of error to humanity, a return of the future to those who must live it. I walk into the street, blending into people who have no idea who I once was, and for the first time in my life, that anonymity feels like freedom. There is no one watching from above, no one correcting from behind, only us, living, colliding, learning, and continuing. And that is enough. If this story resonated with you, not because of power, but because of what happens after power fades, subscribe to the channel to follow future chapters and original, long-form stories. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the deeper arcs ahead. And if this kind of slow burn, idea-driven storytelling speaks to you, leave a comment. It shapes what comes next. Some stories don't end with explosions. They end when the world no longer needs someone to hold it still. And those are often the stories worth remembering.